You can have your
Main event of the evening.
ready to race to you.
These days are Hello and welcome to These Days Are Ours, a Happy Days podcast. I'm Peter.
And I'm Joe.
And today we are discussing Season 9, Episode 19, Hello, Flip.
Okay, Peter, tell us what happens in Hello, Flip.
We open with Marion showing Joni and Chachi old family scrapbook pictures, mostly of Joni as a baby. One of them is of Marion and her sister's family at the beach, including Roger and his little brother Leopold.
Leopold?
Who prefers to be called Flip for obvious reasons. Howard isn't fond of him. As a child, Flip tried to feed his big toe to a crab, and Howard had to get a tetanus shot. More recently, Flip stole a car. Marion defends him, saying Flip was only a victim of circumstance.
He had an ironclad alibi.
He sure did. He said he was taking a shower all night.
He's coming to stay with Roger, who's picking him up at the airport now. Enter Roger, sans Flip. Flip never exited the terminal, and after 2 hours of waiting, Roger gave up. Flip does show up shortly afterwards, having taken a later flight without calling anyone to explain.
I was at the airport in New Jersey playing some cards. I was up $20, Raj. I looked up and I saw the airplane flying overhead. I waved to the pilot, but he wouldn't stop. So I took a later flight.
He brought flowers for Marion and scotch for Howard. Chachi says if Flip is anything like his brother, he wants him on his basketball team. But Flip hates basketball. Roger takes him back to his home.
I just realized I don't even know Flip anymore. For the past 10 years, I've either been away playing basketball or at Yale. Now the whole family is counting on me to straighten them out.
The next day, Joni, Chachi, and Flip go to Arnold's after school. Jenny has been following Flip around and hits on Flip, saying she loves his brother, and so she loves him.
How'd you like to come over to my place tonight and have a small, sheep meaningless affair?
Flip says he's not anything like his brother. Roger arrives, there to get Flip because Flip blew off a meeting with his guidance counselor.
No big deal. I'll see her tomorrow.
Listen, I made a promise you buckle down. You'll see her now. Let's move it, pal.
Yes, sir, Coach Phillips, sir. And then you say, sir.
Flip storms off. Fonzie arrives, and Roger expresses his frustrations about his little brother. He asks Fonzie to come talk to him.
Now maybe, if a less authoritarian role model were to open a dialogue with him, perhaps then we could resolve our difficulties. What do you think, Fonz?
Yes?
That night, at Roger's apartment, Fonzie drops by to talk to Flip. Flip admits that he's annoyed by Roger's overachieving and hyper-cleanliness and constant pep talks and not letting him go to the upcoming Fats Domino concert with the other kids. Fonzie calls Roger back in and gets him to agree to let Flip go to the concert.
I have the feeling that maybe we should let Flip go to that concert this Saturday.
Well, yeah, okay, I guess so.
Oh, great. Thanks, Raj.
Roger can't lend him the car because he has to pick Marion up from her theater group that day, but Flip says he can do it. When Flip comes home the day of the concert, he admits it was canceled and they all went to an Italian restaurant.
What is that on your shirt?
Spaghetti sauce. Want some?
He also claims to have picked up Marion as requested, and Roger says that tomorrow they'll go miniature golfing. Over at the Cunningham house, Marion finally gets inside, having had to walk all the way home. She waited for a long time, chatting with two nice women named Trixie and Sugar.
They were just nice enough to loan me a dime. So I called here several times, but the line was always busy.
I'm sorry, honey. I was talking to Bigelow.
Did he tell you about his wife and the gardener?
Yes.
And now she just wants to go to bed. Howard, however, wants to go confront Flip. They arrive, and Howard immediately exposes Flip's lies. Marion is handling it better than Howard, happy to have met Trixie and Sugar, and mentions that she invited them to dinner tomorrow night.
Marion, I have to explain something to you.
They leave. Roger gets a phone call from Chachi about Flip not showing up for the concert, and Flip admits he lied about the cancellation too. They fight, and Flip says he's going back to New Jersey.
I'm going to New Jersey. I can't handle it.
The next day at Arnold's, Flip complains to Joni, Chachi, and Jenny, and Joni takes him aside to talk. She speculates that when he was little, he wanted to be like Roger, but because he couldn't live up to him, he decided to be bad, where Roger was good. Joni knows a thing or two about perfect older brothers.
You see, I understand about perfect older brothers because I have one of my own.
Richie?
Yeah.
And about rebellion, breaking curfew, gangs, smoking, all of that.
I was doing my best to become a real sleaze bucket.
Did you?
No!
But she eventually decided it was dumb to throw her life away like that, and now she's just being the best person she can be. Roger comes to get Flip, and they both admit that they want Flip to stay. They leave together, arguing about who gets to drive Roger's car.
Why can't I drive? Because it's my car.
You drive too slow. Well, I like to keep all four wheels on the ground.
Jenny follows, planning to jump on the back of their car. The next day, Flip and Chachi organize the kids at Arnold's to prank the next guy who walks in by making him think he's gone deaf. It turns out to be Fonzie. It might have worked, if Potsy didn't come in and ruin it.
Hi, Fonz.
Everyone immediately tattles on Flip and Chachi when Fonzie asks who planned this.
Thank you, Peter. That was Hello, Flip. It first aired back on February 23rd, 1982. Happy Days was followed that night by a new Laverne and Shirley, in which the girls take to the ski slopes to meet some guys. CBS had a lavish new adaptation of Walter Scott's classic novel Ivanhoe, starring Anthony Andrews in the title role.
I am Wilfred of Ivanhoe, a knight proven in battle. I am here to sustain with lance and sword the just rights of the young woman Rebecca.
It's the story of a knight who returns to England from the Crusades only to find himself in a power struggle. The cast also includes James Mason, Sam Neill, and Olivia Hussey. And NBC had a new episode of Father Murphy. This week, Murphy is torn when a wealthy widow wants to adopt one of the kids, Will, from Murphy's orphanage. So, Peter, of those three choices, what are you watching?
Ivanhoe sounds fun. I'll watch Ivanhoe. Get some culture in me.
I am also watching Ivanhoe. I have never read Ivanhoe, so this will be a quick opportunity to catch up on that novel. Hello, Flip was directed by Jerry Paris, and it was written by Paula A. Roth. This was Paula's first script credit on Happy Days, but she's been on the writing staff since the beginning of season 9. She also wrote on Gary Marshall shows like Angie, Laverne and Shirley, and Joni Loves Chachi, plus non-Marshall shows like It's a Living, The Love Boat, Webster, and Perfect Strangers. She was also a producer on Gary Marshall's Good Time Girls, and a producer on pretty much the entire run of Perfect Strangers. As for guest stars, well, we have a new cast member alert. Billy Warlock joins Happy Days as Leopold Flip Phillips.
Flip, flip, flip.
Billy is an actor from Gardena, California, who maintained a very steady presence in film and TV from the early 1980s to the 2010s. He was near the beginning of his career when he did Happy Days, but he'd already had a role in Halloween 2. His dad, Dick Warlock, was a stuntman who played Michael Myers in that film. Billy came to the attention of the Happy Days producers when he doubled for Robin Williams in a skateboarding scene on Mork and Mindy. In the 1980s, he guested on Lottery, Rags to Riches, and Capital. He was also the lead in a 1983 after-school special called But It's Not My Fault.
I didn't, honest, Mr. Barker. You gotta believe me. He had it.
But all that is irrelevant because in 1989, he starred as Bill Whitney in perhaps the greatest movie of all time, the horror comedy Society.
I feel like something's gonna happen. And if I scratch the surface, there'll be something terrible underneath.
In the 1990s, he landed a recurring role as Eddie Kramer on Baywatch. He also played Lyle Menendez in a made-for-TV movie about the Menendez brothers in 1994 and was the title character in the infamous interactive movie Mr. Payback in 1995.
I'm part man, part cyborg. I cannot violate my programming. I don't kill except in self-defense or to protect the innocent.
And we have to mention Billy's soap opera career, too. Billy had long runs on General Hospital and Days of Our Lives. He also did stints on Young and the Restless, As the World Turns, and One Life to Live. Today, he's retired from acting and is a ski instructor in Telluride, Colorado. So, Peter, what did you think of Billy Warlock as Flip?
He was a lot of fun. My main exposure to him before this and before I watched Society at your prompting was Baywatch, but more specifically Baywatching, which is the kind of sort of recap series by Alison Pregler, which mercilessly takes the piss out of Baywatch. And for the season that he was on it, Eddie Kramer was one of her favorite targets.
Eddie's first name is Edgar?
There's a real disconnect between how he is supposed to be portrayed and how he comes across as. Just thinking about the Angel Pug shirt he wore at one point on the show. In this episode, I think he's a lot of fun. There is a limit to how far Happy Days can go in portraying a troubled teenage delinquent, but I think they hit a decent enough balance with Flip here, where he's lying to his siblings, he's constantly inconveniencing him, he causes Marion to almost get frostbite, and he may or may not have gotten into a fight instead of going to the Fats Domino concert. I thought that his dynamic with Ted McGinley was believably sibling-like, especially since they're supposed to be two siblings who haven't seen each other really in 10 years.
I like that Flip is basically written as a reckless knucklehead who just likes to have fun. He's not sullen and sarcastic and angry and brooding. He's not written like a serious, troubled teen character at all. He's more like an evolution of where Bart Simpson might be in a few years.
Oh my gosh, yes.
So I have to ask, you did see Society. What did you think of that film and Billy Warlock in it?
Society is an absolute blast. You advised me to go in completely blind, and I did, and I think that was the right choice. But it does make it kind of hard to talk about Billy Warlock and what he did well in that movie. So, spoilers for Society. If you're listening to this right now and you haven't seen it, pause this episode, go watch Society, be warned that it's a very gross movie, and then come back here. So anyway, I think that what Society does very well is that before the big climax, so to speak, like, it's not clear exactly what is going on with Billy Whitney, who is Billy Warlock's character. Like, it's not clear if everything around him is wrong wrong or if he's the one who's maybe a little bit messed up. The opening scene of the movie is him just kind of moving around the house in the darkness holding a knife, and he kind of sort of spies on his sister when she's in the shower. So what's going on? What's the creepy factor here? And then it gets to the climax, and it very much confirms that, yeah, everyone around him is creepy. He himself is normal-ish. I think that Billy Warlock plays that very well.
This movie completely changed my outlook on Billy Warlock as an actor. Before I saw that movie, I mainly thought of him as Flip from Happy Days, but this takes him into a whole other realm. I can't even describe the last third of the film at all.
It's really peak 80s. Look at these cool special effects we can do, and look at how gross we can make this. It's great.
Basically, I'm glad to have Billy Warlock on Happy Days. I like his odd couple dynamic with neat freak Roger. I'm looking forward to see what else happens with these two characters as they get to know each other. As for songs this week, at Arnold's we hear instrumental versions of The Locomotion by Little Eva and Personality by Lloyd Price. Later, during the tag, we hear Surfin' USA by the Beach Boys. Nothing new this week. As for cultural and historical references, we learn in this episode that Joni was born in a hospital.
And here we are bringing Joni home from the hospital.
In America, birth moved from home to the hospital in the 20th century, and hospital births would have been the norm by the time Joni came along in the 1940s. That was when obstetricians, usually male, started replacing midwives. Have we determined exactly when Joni was born? I think she was conceived at the end of World War II when Howard came back home.
Roughly, yes. But also remember that Happy Days plays fast and loose with time and history and continuity.
Chachi asks how long Joni was bald as a baby.
What are you so embarrassed about? You were a cute little baby.
Thanks.
How long were you bald?
Most infants start to grow hair at around 6 to 12 months. Howard says he had to have a tetanus shot after Flip tried to feed Howard's big toe to a crab.
Fiddle-dee-dee. That will require a tetanus shot.
I thought this was excessive, but the skin broken by a bite from a marine animal could become infected with tetanus bacteria. Experts say you should have a tetanus shot within 48 hours of a bite if you haven't had one in the last 5 years.
PSA.
Exactly. We're trying to keep people safe, Peter. Flip presents Marion with flowers from the Garden State.
Here, flowers from the Garden State.
This nickname for New Jersey is officially attributed to Abraham Browning, the state's former attorney general, who said it during a speech in 1876. Some people say Browning was just copying a quote that Benjamin Franklin had said earlier. Either way, it remains the nickname of the state, even though New Jersey is not especially identified with gardening today.
Or they're just big fans of Zach Braff.
Garden State, rated R, now playing in theaters.
Fonzie once again says, "You ain't just whistling Dixie." The expression whistling Dixie means to engage in unrealistic fantasizing. It originally referred to Confederate soldiers vainly hoping that they would win the Civil War.
Better him than me. You ain't whistling Dixie.
If someone is not whistling Dixie, it means he or she is telling the truth. Roger advises Flip to factor out his math homework.
Why don't you factor out? Why don't you?
To factor a number is to express it as a product of other whole numbers called its factors. 12, for instance, can be factored as 3 times 4. Peter, in your school years, did you have to do a lot of factoring?
If I did, I have blocked it out from my brain.
Schultz, what? Can you teach me how to factor? You know why? Cause all the students after.
Hey.
All I need is a real good quadratic, and for you to back me up and check it.
Get it.
Flip calls Roger Mr. Clean.
I take it this was Mr. Clean's idea.
Amazingly, this cleaning product and its famous mascot only debuted in 1958. The character is the product of a Chicago advertising agency and is described as a muscular, tanned, bald man who cleans things very well. He was initially a live-action character.
Excuse me, lady, but floor cleaning doesn't have to be that tough.
Listen, mister. I know a little more about floor cleaning than you do.
But he has since become animated.
It used to be live action?
There used to be a real actor dressed up as Mr. Clean. Would you prefer that to the current animated Mr. Clean?
If he was live action, then he couldn't have been in the classic animated film Food Fight.
Is that Mr. Clean? Did Mr. Clean just show up in my movie?
How did I know that the movie Food Fight was going to come up in this conversation? Well, do you remember the ads a few years ago where housewives were like horny for the animated Mr. Clean? Do you remember that at all?
No! Why would you do that?
Roger organizes the contents of his refrigerator into the 4 food groups.
He divides his foods into 4 basic food groups.
From 1956 to 1992, the USDA, that's the United States Department of Agriculture, recommended 4 basic categories of food: milk, meats, fruits and vegetables, and bread and cereals. This was replaced by the food pyramid in 1992. So, Peter, I am imagining that the 4 food groups was completely before your time.
I grew up with the food pyramid.
Do you have fond memories of the food pyramid? Was that something that was interesting to learn about?
I was indifferent to the food pyramid then, and I'm indifferent now.
Flip says he wants to go to a Fats Domino concert on Saturday.
Just let me go to the Fats Domino concert on Saturday with all the other kids.
Antoine Fats Domino was a singer, songwriter, and piano player from New Orleans who was one of the founding fathers of rock and roll in the 1950s with such classics as Ain't That a Shame and Blueberry Hill. His music was frequently heard and referenced in the early years of Happy Days, and Fats even re-recorded some of his songs for the show. If this story is taking place in 1963, Fats Domino spent the first half of that year performing at the Flamingo Hotel and Casino in Las Vegas. He did a handful of shows outside Vegas that summer, including one in Chicago. Then he went right back to the Flamingo. But this story is taking place in winter, so my guess is that there never was a Fats Domino concert to begin with.
Chachi did call Roger to say, hey, Flip never showed up to the concert.
I thought about that too, and I thought that Chachi was also lying, because Chachi is also known to be a liar.
So you think this is all just to get back at Flip for not wanting to be on his basketball team?
Yes. Roger puts hospital corners on his bed sheets.
When you are finished with your hospital corners, could I see you for a minute?
Believe it or not, fitted sheets with elastic corners were not invented until the 1990s. Before then, nurses at hospitals would fold crisp corners on bed sheets to keep them in place. These became known as hospital corners. Can you believe that fitted sheets with the elastic corners only go back to the 90s? It seems like something so basic.
Yeah, it's one of those things like toilet paper where you can't really imagine life without them, but once upon a time there was life without it, and it was probably worse.
Roger says he's going to take Flip to play miniature golf.
I'm going to take you miniature golfing tomorrow.
Miniature golf? Wow!
This sport, also known as putt-putt, started in South Africa in the 1910s and quickly spread to America, becoming common in the 1920s due to the development of artificial turf. Have you ever gone miniature golfing?
I have, once. It was pirate-themed.
Oh, cool. I haven't gone in years, but I love miniature golf courses and the theming more so than playing the actual game. I have negative memories of the actual game because one time I got hit in the face with a golf club. So,
oh, yikes. My condolences.
Flip says he broke Joni's Tiny Tears doll.
I haven't seen you since I broke your Tiny Tears doll, and you've got my life figured out.
This was a real toy line from a company called American Character Dolls. Tiny Tears were heavily advertised on TV and in magazines and were first marketed in 1950.
Dry your tears, tiny tears, you're my very own baby. Mother's here, tiny tears, singing you a lullaby.
The doll's main selling point was that it was able to cry real tears, providing you filled it up with water. American Character Dolls went out of business in 1968, but other companies marketed their own versions of Tiny Tears for decades after that. Peter, were you familiar with those dolls that cry real tears?
I came around when those were no longer really all that novel. I was familiar with them, but I had no real interest in them. If I want a doll, I just want it to be a regular, not crying, not anything doll. Don't give me too much responsibility. I am a child.
Flip refers to Joni as a real whiz kid.
What a real whiz kid.
The original whiz kids were not kids at all, but U.S. Air Force veterans who became Ford Motors executives after World War II. The term comes from Quiz Kids, a popular radio game show of the 1940s in which exceptionally bright children would answer questions sent in by listeners.
The makers of Alka-Seltzer present the Quiz Kids, 5 bright youngsters ready to match wits with one another and with you.
Quiz Kids later became a television show as well. Other observations this week: Howard's chair is gone for no reason in this episode, forcing Howard to sit on an end table. He does not look comfortable. He does not even look stable. He looks like he's going to fall off that thing. Why would there be separate flights, Peter, from New Jersey to Wisconsin within 2 hours of each other? That made no sense to me.
I don't know how airplanes work. I just went with it.
You have to believe it for the story, but I had a tough time with that aspect of the plot. We get a very brief but memorable Lori Beth cameo this week. She's in her Arnold's uniform. Did you notice Lori Beth in this?
I did, very briefly.
An immediate benefit of Flip's presence on the show is that it gives Jenny a more age-appropriate love object.
Also, I suspect that Flip is supposed to be like a new additional Chachi, in that Chachi himself isn't really much of a bad boy anymore. He's a sports-playing band crooner. He's about as threatening as a declawed cat now. Flip's not really threatening either, but he is a little bit in a Bart Simpson-y way. And Bart Simpson scandalized everyone when he first debuted, so hey.
This time, it is Bart's wisecracking T-shirts that are in trouble. This one has been expelled from some schools for its profanity. Another, underachiever and proud of it, has been kicked out of classes from Orange, California to Fremont, Ohio.
The real reason why Flip is here is to be the new Chachi. Let's not forget that Joni Loves Chachi is very close in the show's future.
It's a-comin'.
Be ready for it. And I'm kind of disappointed that we never got to see Trixie and Sugar. I don't think they're going to generate much business, though, by hanging around a community theater after it's closed.
The implication is that Trixie and Sugar are sex workers, as mentioned by Marion mentioning how friendly they were to every man who passed by. It is really nice that Marion just immediately befriended them, and she invited them over to dinner because they were nice enough to lend her a dime. Not that it did her much good because the phone line was busy because Howard was talking to someone else.
I really wanted at least a brief scene where Trixie and Sugar showed up at the Cunningham house, and maybe the tag was them having dinner with Howard and Marion, but instead we get the prank tag.
Which did make me laugh, mostly for Potsy just coming in and obliviously ruining all their hard work. But it would have been better with Trixie and Sugar.
It's a compromise. I will admit that the prank scene is pretty good, but I would have liked the Trixie and Sugar scene too. It reminded me a little bit of the scene where Marion befriended the prostitutes at the police station when Richie was arrested.
Yeah, Marion's just a very sweet and friendly woman, and I like that about her.
So, Peter, were there any outstanding Happy Days fashions in Hello Flip?
The dress that Jenny wore in her first scene where she's trying to seduce Flip, I can only describe it as something Scarlett O'Hara would wear in the 1950s. It's just this big, fluffy, pinkish red monstrosity, and she's even carrying a handkerchief.
I wondered what was going on with that outfit. I couldn't understand it, but that was a very good description of what she's wearing. Flip himself is not in full Flip mode, fashion-wise, yet. We do not get Flip's signature look,
which is the crop top for men, which I'm sure that was very popular in the 1960s. But in this episode, he wears a lot of puffy jackets because this episode takes place in winter. Those probably aren't historically accurate either, but they are very cute.
Yeah, it was a very 80s looking winter jacket that he wears. So, Peter, I will ask that age-old timeless question. Was this episode any good?
For an episode that only exists to introduce a new character to replace an old character who is going to be leaving soon, it's very fun. I think that Flip's dynamic with Roger feels just fresh enough to not be a complete retread, and he's a pretty consistently fun character. There are some very amusing jokes in this episode, and I just really love Marion making friends with the two sex workers and not judging them at all, although she may or may not be aware that they are sex workers.
I did not have great memories of Flip because he felt at the time like an intruder, an imposter, an interloper. But going back to this episode, I can definitely see why the producers cast Billy Warlock in this part. I also like his dynamic with Roger. They have very opposite personalities and they're clashing and they're sharing an apartment. That's going to be kind of fun. All in all, this was a very enjoyable episode. And I think that America made the wrong call about Flip. They rejected Flip, but they should not have. At least on the basis of this episode. We'll see where the character goes from there, but I think he got off to a pretty darn good start. As an introductory episode, this one works very well, and it's a good half hour of television, too. So definitely give Hello Flip a try. So, Peter, how can people keep up with us and find out about all the wonderful things that we are doing?
Listeners can follow us on Twitter at Fonzie Podcast. They can follow me on Twitter at Peter Wolfranc. That's PeterVulfranc.
And they can follow me on Twitter at Joe_A_Blevins. They can find this podcast online at thesedaysaroours.libsyn.com. And they can email us with questions, comments, and concerns at thesedaysaroourspodcast@gmail.com. So, Peter, what do we have on the docket for next week?
Next week, Chachi confronts his own status as a failure in Chachi's future.
We both know these children have no future.
Chachi has a future? That surprises me.
Prove me wrong, kids. Prove me wrong.
So, see you later, alligator.
In a while, crocodile.
Now when I get lonesome, I jump on the telephone. When I get lonesome, I jump on the telephone. I call my baby, tell I'm on my way back home. Now flip, flop, and fly. I don't care if I die. Now flip, flop, and fly. I don't care if I die. Don't ever leave me, don't ever say goodbye.
I'm going to New Jersey. I can't handle it.